Hi, I'm Danny, and these are my Diecast Disasters. And here we have a Hot Wheels road roller from the Super Rigs. And in this video, I'm going to be ratting it up and putting a 3D printed tipper deck on the back of it. And also, it comes with the classic old bone shaker, and so I'll make a rat rod out of that as well. Okay, so let's crack into it. And we'll start out with the truck. And I'll drill the posts out and take it apart. There's 3 posts, 2 metal ones at the front and a plastic one at the rear, so be careful when you drill that out. Right, with the post drilled out, now I can take it apart. So there's the cab there, that's cast. It's got that red windscreen in it. It's in there quite tight, so I'll just use the end of this paintbrush here to push it out. There it goes. And then there's the engine and the stacks. And then this rear section there, and the chassis with the 3 sets of wheels in it. I'm going to use some paint stripper to strip the paint off of the casting there. And then I'll finish cleaning that up with a wire brush on my Dremel. With that cleaned up, I'll move on to these chromed parts. So I've got a jar of hot water and some caustic soda. I'll just give that a quick stir and then drop in my chromed pieces. And I'll leave it in real time so you can see how fast the chrome disappears off them. So there, I just put the lid back on the caustic soda, and already most of the chrome's gone. And I'll just rinse these off under the tap. So I'm going to be using my new 3D printer that my Patreons helped to buy to make a tipper deck to go on the back of the truck there. So here it is, mocked up in 3D. 3 different parts, and I'm going to put a wooden deck on it. So I made my 3D models, and so this is a slicing program for my printer. It's a Flash Forge, And this just takes the 3D model and puts it in a form that the printer can handle. And I'm going to add a brim around it. It's an extrusion printer, so it prints with a little nozzle that squirts out plastic basically. So that brim around it will help to anchor it while the printer prints it all. You can also resize parts in the slicer as well. So once the models are ready, I can take them over on a flash card to my 3D printer. And then I'll just browse through the flash card there. Let's see, there's a few different models on it. Pick the one that I want. And then just press build. And off she goes. So as I mentioned, this is a filament extrusion printer, so there's a limit to how detailed you can go with it, and I'm pretty much pushing it here with these little parts. This is how they come out of the printer. You can see they've got that brim around them. I'll just tidy that up. So you can usually just pull it off, and then I'll sand and file until it's all nice and tidy. Another thing about the filament printers is you do get little line layers where the different layers are built up, so it's not a completely smooth surface. I'll show you a trick for dealing with some of that, and also just sanding tidies it up. And because I'm making a ratted out vehicle as well, the rough texture won't matter quite as much. Here are the ramps for the rear of it. I'm just going to use my pin vise and a little drill to drill the holes through them where they're going to attach onto the trailer. So there's already kind of holes in there, but this will tidy them up. So here you can see the pattern from the filament on the casting. So to smooth that off, I'm just going to filler it with some of this Starbond medium thick super glue. And then I'll just be able to sand that down smooth later on. I'll just use that where there's big surfaces that don't look so smooth. And here are the parts of the tipper deck once I've tidied them all up. So I've got a piece of quite thick steel rod there. I'll use this to hold the ramps on, so I'll just cut a couple of short lengths of it there to fit. I can put, oops, dropping it there, and I can put the ramp on. There we go, those are working nicely, and that remaining piece I'm going to glue onto the rear of the truck, and then use another little piece of the steel rod to attach that. So just using some more super glue to glue that on. And there's the tipper deck working, and I also printed out a headache bar to go on the front of it there. I've got a couple of these Siku telescopic loaders here, and I'm going to use them to replace the horrible wheels that were on this. So these Siku wheels have got quite fat axles on them, so I'm going to have to drill out the chassis of the truck and put some thicker axle casings in there. So there we go, I've put 3 new axle casings in, and you can see the wheels fit in there nicely now. I used my printer again to print out a couple of rounded headlights. Now, if you can see here, part of the windscreen actually flattens out into the sill there. And I don't want to use the red windscreen, so I'm going to have to chop it up a little bit so that I've just got the sill to put back in there. So I used my Dremel and a cutting disc, and then gave it a bit of a file and a sand, so I can stick that back in there. And I'll just paint over it so you can't see it's red anymore, of course. And so that's all the fabrication work done. Now we'll move on to painting. I'll start out with the cab. So I hit it with a base coat of silver, and then a rust layer of red brown, or it's orange brown, sorry, and another darker brown just very lightly over the top, sort of splotchy layer. Next I've got some green and red and yellow. So I'm going to paint my truck first with yellow, and then red, and then the green finally over the top of that. And then I'm going to take some fine sandpaper and some water and sand it back down to expose the different layers of paint, and then the rust layer underneath. And here it is after I've finished my sanding. Here I've got some rust effect, some burnt red and some German red brown. And I'm going to use just a piece of sponge to apply a little bit more rust onto the cab. So just where I think it needs a little bit more, and also some areas where I've maybe sanded through a bit too much and it's showing the metal underneath. And then once I was happy with the rust, I'm going to apply a black wash into the panel lines. It's only really the doors to do. And finally, to finish it off, you can see I've painted the headlights silver there. Then I've got some of this crystal clear. And as it says in the name, this sets crystal clear. So I'm just going to put a little rounded blob over each of the headlights, and when that sets, it'll be like transparent glass lens. Well, hopefully it will. Moving on to the engine and stack section, I gave that a fresh coat of silver paint, and then I'll apply a black wash all over it. Next it was given a light rust treatment. And I just finished it off with a little bit of metallic blue on the ends of all the pipes. And of course I sealed it with some clear coat. The tipper deck was also painted with a base of silver, and again with a black wash. Then I gave it a rust treatment. I went a bit more heavy on this part. Once that had all dried, I'm just going to add some more black wash to the ramps. I only did this on the top side. For the wooden deck, I've cut out a couple of pieces of thin balsa wood. I use a stiff wire brush and scrape it over the wood pieces to give them some texture. To weather them, I start out with some watered down grey paint. I think that's a little bit too thick actually, so I'm just going to water it down a bit more. There we go. And once that had dried, I'm going to apply a sepia wash over the top of that. So I've just got a little bit of sepia ink and watered that down. Here's how they look after they've all fully dried. Hopefully they look nice and old now. And then I just use some PVA glue to glue them onto the deck. The chassis was given a base coat of silver. Then I'm going to detail the seats, so I started out painting them white. top of that. And then I finish the seats off with a brown wash. After that, I can apply a black wash all over the rest of the chassis. Once that had fully dried, I lightly airbrushed underneath with some Vallejo rust texture. And then I'll finish it off with the sponge and some more rust treatment. And I'm going to go quite heavy on the chassis of the truck as well. Here are those Siku wheels. So to paint these, I'll start by popping the tyres off them. Then I gave them a base coat of silver and a black wash. And then using the sponge again to apply some rust and then some green over the top of that. And here they are once I've put the tyres back on. And now I can start reassembling it. So I've put the wheels on there. And here's the tipper deck. I've cut another little length of rod there and using that to attach the deck. And finally, just putting the engine and the cab back on. And so that's our truck done. I can put that aside and move on to the bone shaker. I'm going to rat rod it up. So I've already drilled out the post. It's quite a nice one, this one. It's got a metal base and a metal body. So I'll take the wheels out. I'm just going to cut the axles because I'm not going to be reusing them. Next, I can use the paint stripper to strip all the paint off of the castings. And then the obligatory cleanup with the wire brush. And here they are, nice and shiny and ready to go. The next thing I'm going to do is hack up the body of the bone shaker. So I'm going to cut off the roof there, and I'm also going to cut off the bonnet or hood. So you can see I'm getting shaky holding it, and that's because it's getting really hot already. And she really heats up when you're cutting off this back part. It's quite thick. So once I'd hacked that up, I also gave it a good clean up with a file and some sandpaper. Using some hot water and baking soda again to remove the chrome from the plastic section of the bone shaker. Again, I'll leave it in real time. You can watch the chrome disappearing. Here it is after a rinse. No more chrome on that. And now I'm going to chop off that hideous front end. So I don't want the bottom of it to be all lumpy like that, so I use the Dremel to chop off the bulk. And now smooth it up with a file. I use a little piece of styrene to make a firewall, and I've used some thick Starbond superglue to filler it there, and then sanded and filed that back down. This is an engine from something, I don't remember. I think it might be a diaper dragger engine. Anyway, I've stripped that and trimmed it so that it'll fit into my bone shaker. I've rebuilt the front end there with a raised axle, and here is a grill that I've harvested from another car. So I've glued that on an angle. Here is the fourth set of wheels from the Sekus that I didn't use on the truck. I'm going to use that for the rear wheels. And I've also added a couple little half round headlights at the front there. So here's our parts ready for some paint. I'll start out with the body. It's got a base coat of rust, so it's orange brown and a darker brown. Then I've got some military green. I'm just going to add a little bit of yellow to it to lighten it because it's quite a dark military green. And then sanding that down to expose some of the rust underneath. Applying some rust. And finishing up with the black wash in the panel lines. For the chassis, I start off with some black primer, then silver over the top of that. Then it was given a black wash. And airbrushing the rust texture very lightly underneath it before adding some more rust with the sponge and a little bit of green over the top, the same green as the body, and adding that over the top of the grille and the headlights, and again with some crystal clear over the headlights as well. The engine was primed black and then painted silver. Then it was given a black wash. And again, I finished off the pipes with some metallic blue weathering powder. So here's the wheels. I'm going to use the front wheels from a Hot Wheels Land Rover. They were left over from a Land Rover that I did for a young lad a few videos ago. You can check that out. So these were painted silver, then black wash again. And then rust and a bit of the same green that I painted the body of the rat rod with. And so that's pretty much it. I also detailed the interior. I didn't take much footage of that. Here are the rat rod wheels with the tyres back on. And here are all of our finished parts ready to go back together. So while I'm doing that, we'll just take a look back at what we started with. And I'll throw out a massive thanks to my awesome Patreons who've helped to buy the 3D printer that I used to finish this build. Thanks heaps to you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, remember to check out the main channel page for heaps more similar videos, and like and subscribe to get notifications of future videos.